Phil Zimmerman in 1991 came out with the PGP, pretty good privacy encryption, and he says, I don't know if this is true, I don't remember in 1991 what he said, but he says now that he wrote that so that dissidents could communicate without getting jailed. And he then got arrested in the United States because he was accused of letting encryption technology outside our borders. I think he got off because he actually published it as a text and not as software. And so everybody could read the text and implement PGP. He didn't let any software out, but so they finally dropped the case about 5 years later. It was 96 before they finally told him he was not going to be prosecuted. But I mean, this stuff is very sensitive. But if you have, if you do banking over the internet, you use this stuff. I mean, we want it to work, right? I'm a victim of identity theft. If you're not yet a victim of identity theft, you may not have as strong a feeling as I have about it. But someday, you may know what I'm talking about. Phil Zimmerman says, what if we made everybody write their mail, their U.S. mail on postcards? Would we like that? I mean, nobody has anything to hide, right? We're all good guys. We don't hide anything. And so would you like to return your tax return on a big postcard? I mean, obviously not. I mean, we have legitimate reasons for encryption. And if we don't have a way of being assured of that encryption, we might as well not encrypt at all. Phil Zimmerman says there really isn't any middle ground. So we can talk about this later. It looks like there's ways to make it harder for someone who's not got the actual key, and that's okay. I think we decided that law enforcement can do whatever it sees it can try to do, but to compel technology companies to take peculiar paths, like making their encryption decipherable on demand is just going a little bit out of bounds. Let me look at another thought experiment of human communication in general. We've had private communication for 2 million years, up till 140 years ago. And now we have electronically facilitated communication. Opportunity, right? FBI, oh, wow, we can listen in on this stuff. Never had that opportunity before. Now we have data at rest. Another opportunity. It's not just transient anymore. We have stuff stored. So these are really just opportunistic attacks by law enforcement that feels that they're doing the right thing for the public, but the unintended consequences, like I think Arnold said, are really very hard to fathom, and in most cases people will argue that they are greater than in the case of U.S. terrorism since 9/11, I think 45 people have died from terrorist actions in the last 15 years. There's been another 45 extreme political things like Planned Parenthood attacks and so forth. Actually less than 80 people total. So compare that with the unintended consequence of what the possibility would be of dissidents being apprehended or anybody losing the economic value out of their taxes, withheld taxes or whatever it is. It's a much broader downside with a small upside that I think Ryan is saying there are other ways perhaps to achieve the upside. I think we all have to admit that strong encryption is here. We can't put the genie back in the bottle. It was late 70s, 35 years ago or so, when the mathematics were first published about what they called at the time trapdoor algorithms. My father was a mathematician. He was fascinated by trapdoor algorithms that were just published, prime number multiplication and so forth. Well, that's out there. I mean, if some version of the Feinstein-Burr bill passes where you can't use strong encryption, we can write our own. And are we breaking the law? I mean, that's crazy. I mean, look at about the same time that Bell Telephone invented communication electronically. fingerprints started getting used to solve crimes. So criminals started wearing gloves. Well, it would be tantamount to saying you can't sell gloves without the fingertips cut out, because we want to make sure we catch those criminals because their fingerprints will be all over the place because they can't wear gloves. Well, then you'd say, I could make my own gloves and maybe I want to keep my hands warm. And that would be breaking the law, because basically you're saying if you can't build the encryption yourself legally, then we should say, well, you can't wear gloves without the fingertips cut out. So I think you get a little bit silly thinking about this, but if you put it in perspective, I can't find a way around the fact that we have to live with strong encryption. We have to be able to solve crimes in spite of encryption in transit and in place. The problem, of course, economics with the U.S. Companies is that if we don't do the right thing with encryption, some other country will, some island nation will become the encryption capital of the world, and all companies will put their servers there, and we'll lose a lot of economic value here. So our public position probably ought to be to elect people who make laws who think about this. And Lindsey Graham did a wonderful amount of thinking between his knee-jerk reaction and his later reaction. I want to just point out that a smartphone is nothing more than a super memory aid and a communication device. So if we strip those two things apart, we have a transient communication device, either data or voice or whatever, and then a huge amount of memory. If I could remember all my appointments, all my contact lists, all my past whatever, all my past browser history, if I could remember all that, I wouldn't need a smartphone, right? The smartphone is really just a memory aid, because we're not good enough to memorize this stuff. There was yesterday's New York Times, quadriplegic can now move his hand for the first time from an implant in his brain, literally implant, not the kind that we see the DOD doing with the brain wave, but literally in the brain, implanted, and can move his hand. What's happening? What's going to happen? I checked with a friend of mine who used to work at Rational with me, works at Apple now. He says, well, don't tell anybody, so we're all sworn to secrecy. The iPhone 17 will have a $100 option to be implanted in your brain. It's only $100. I'm going to definitely do it. And that will protect you with the Fifth Amendment as well. So there you go.